League of Legends has a strictly defined meta when it comes to its roles that everyone just abides by. You know the one. Top, jungle, mid, AD, and support. You even have to pick your role when you queue up for ranked. But why does this meta with roles exist in the first place, and how did it come to be? And also, why are supports paired with ADC champions instead of mages or bruisers? And why is mid lane a solo lane at the start of the game, but in the mid game we swap our bot lane to be there instead? These are just a couple of the questions I seek to answer in this video, where you'll also discover by learning these answers, you'll get a really interesting insight into pro-level drafting that'll help you draft and play better in your own games. Now before I play the intro, I want to quickly let you all know I'll be running a one-off class teaching all about mid and late game macro exactly 1 week after this video posts. The class is entirely made and presented by me and includes some really cool stuff that I've compiled over the last few years of coaching. I've designed it to be useful for everyone, all roles and all levels of play from iron to aspiring pro players, and I can confidently vouch for this one guys because I made it, so trust me, you're gonna find it really cool. It's just $10 a ticket and the link to where you can grab yours is in the video description below. Now enjoy the video guys, this one really is a banger.
My name's Rogue and I played League of Legends professionally for 7 years. Now I'm a full-time content creator and coach for all ranks, Iron through to Challenger. So if you want more information of what a coaching session with me will look like, you can find more information by following the link in the video description below.
So why is mid lane a solo lane early, but a duo lane later in the game? Well, simply put, the lane is shorter mid than what it is in either of the side lanes. You can see that easily here where I draw a line between the 2 towers in mid lane. Then when we overlay that line onto a side lane, you'll see there's a bit of extra space showing us the lane is longer in a side lane than what it is in mid. This makes mid lane a safer place to be if you're alone, especially if you're playing in a mobile, cooldown based champion that is vulnerable to being chased down, which is the case with most mages in the early game. This same point makes the champion pool of top lane make even more sense when you think about it. See, most top lane champions are either a conqueror using fighter champion who are great at extended trades, which is what you get when you play in a longer lane, or they're a tank champion who is much less vulnerable to getting ganked and caught out. Then in bot lane, our vulnerable ADC player gets to be babysit by a support, which just protects against the disadvantage of playing a vulnerable champion in such a long lane. Another thing to note is that there is actually a shorter distance out of base in mid lane than there is in the side lanes. This is just basic Pythagoras theorem when you can see the side lane as the hypotenuse of a triangle that spans down the entire map. I bet you didn't expect to see Pythagoras theorem in your League of Legends video now, did you? Now this shorter distance means you can more easily run to lane out of base, leaving you open to taking recalls more often in mid than you can in a side lane, which is yet another reason for why we put our duo in a side lane to start off in the game. Since with 2 people in a lane, there are more options for ways that you can recall early without losing so many minions, such as staggering your recalls apart from one another. Now back in the early seasons of League, there was no such thing as Void Grubs or Rift Herald. The only objective in the game was Dragon, and Dragon used to spawn earlier at 2 minutes 30. So when people had to choose if to make top or bot lane their duo lane, it was only logical to put 2 members bot so that you'd have more people in proximity to the only objective on the map. This is simply incredible game design that naturally gave us a meta that still lives on today. And this is the problem I have with the way that Riot balances the game nowadays. You see, the reason we have the 5 roles that we do is because it was baked into the game's design, and Riot directly incentivized you for doing it. They still do that now, but in a much more forceful way. Sure, swapping my bot lane to top is not something you want me to do, and one way to make me not do it is to make tower shots do 4,000 damage. That works. But I'm not going to pretend to be a game designer here, but you could do a lot of different things to incentivize it. You could bring Dragon Spawn earlier, you could make support items deal more damage to neutral objectives so that having a support bot lane was a benefit. There's better ways to address these issues rather than just force it down your throat with the tower that just one-shots everything. Now I'll end my rant there, but feel free to continue the conversation in the comments. I'm keen to hear your guys' opinion on these kind of recent changes, like the lane swap detection, the force support item, and the limit on smites to 1 per team. But for now, let's move on and answer a few more questions and see what we can learn from them. So why do we play mages in solo lanes and ADCs in the duo lane? The answer is again really simple. Mages scale better with champion levels than ADCs do. When you level up, you get to put a point into an ability that makes that ability more powerful, usually by increasing its damage and lowering its cooldown. For champions that primarily play through the use of their QWER abilities like mages and assassins, this makes getting points into those abilities incredibly important for the overall strength of your champion. For example, look at one of the most staple mid lane picks in the entire game, Syndra, a champion who plays exclusively through her ability usage and receives a buff once she maxes her Q that allows her to store 2 charges of it, massively increasing the effectiveness of the spell. Or Cassiopeia, who needs to press E every 1 second. Or Xerath, who literally has never auto-attacked a champion before and plays only using his spells. If you were to put one of these champions bot lane where they were to have a huge portion of their XP siphoned by a support that they were forced to share the lane with, they would end up being far weaker as their spells just wouldn't hit nearly as hard or be up as often. ADC champions on the other hand need gold and items. Sure, getting level ups feels good no matter what, but they're far more important on the types of champions that need to max their abilities, such as mages and assassins. Now, I know what you're going to say next, but what about people who play ADCs mid? ADCs mid literally terrorized pro play for years. And yes, that's true, but look at exactly which ADCs were played mid lane during this time. Firstly, there was Tristana. Tristana is an ADC with a passive that increases her auto attack range, scaling with the level of her champion. Then there was Corki. Corki in the past used to be able to store up to 8 rockets with his ultimate, and in the mid game he would hit level 11 and spam rockets at you the same way as Ziggs would spam bombs. Then Riot updated Corki to play more through his auto attacks and limited his ultimate to store only 4 rockets, and suddenly the champion doesn't appear mid lane anymore and is now played bot lane almost exclusively again, just like in the old days. But we never saw Caitlyn mid, and we never saw Jinx mid, because it's just not as important for these champions to max their spells. So we play tanks and bruisers top lane because they benefit from being in a long lane. We play mages mid because they get the safety early of a short lane and they get to benefit well from the solo XP they get. And we play ADCs bot lane because someone is going to have to share the XP with the support, so we might as well make it the guy who doesn't need to max his abilities and is perfectly content just playing for gold and for items. Now, there's still one big question remaining that I hinted on at the start of the video. We know why we solo lane a mage mid early, but why do we then swap our bot lane to be mid after laning phase ends? Well, there's actually 2 answers to this question. The first one is to do with macro in the mid game. In the mid game, the arrival times between mid and side waves are staggered, meaning if you get priority over the mid wave, you can transfer that priority into either of the side lanes since it arrives later. This is something I've spoken about a ton already on my channel, so I'm not going to re-explain it in this video, but just know that having more members mid becomes important in the mid game because the team that gets priority over the mid wave will then get control over the majority of the map. So we want lots of people and we want our strongest people to be mid lane in the mid game. The more interesting reason for why we swap bot lane mid again is because the lane is shorter. Most ADC champions in the mid game will be more vulnerable to being chased down when compared to most of the mid lane champions, even mages. A big reason for this is the fact that at this point of the game, solo laners would have laned by themselves for a while and will generally outlevel the ADC by about 2 to 3 levels, making them much tankier and much stronger in a 1v1. So if a level 9 ADC is left alone in a side lane against a level 11 Ahri who can chase them down with the long lane, you can imagine what will happen next. So we generally therefore move our ADC to mid, and we bring the support as well, since mid control is so important, and mid laners are much safer in the long lanes in these later levels. Here's where this video becomes really interesting though. You don't always want to swap your ADC to mid. Pro teams in draft will generally consider who is going to be mid and who is going to be catching side waves in the mid game when they are doing their draft. And because of this, they will often pick their ADC and mid lane champions in a particular way in order to complement one another in this regard. See, the reason you generally swap your ADC to mid in the mid game is because now there is safety in numbers with the incentive to have more people mid, and also the lane is shorter, so when you're playing those immobile ADCs that are vulnerable to getting chased down by the very scary assassins in mid game, you stick the mid lane. The problem is, what happens if our mid laner is in the same boat? Let's think about champions like Ziggs and Veigar and Xerath. These are all immobile champions that suffer the same problem of being very unsafe in long lanes. So generally what pro teams will do is they will pair these type of mid laners with ADC champions that are much safer in a long lane. You'll never see something like Xerath Caitlyn, although it sounds like it makes sense because they're both long-range zone control champions. They don't work on a team comp together because they don't have someone who can push outside. Vayne, on the other hand, or Kai'Sa, or Lucian, are all the kind of champions who are actually very safe in a side lane by ADC standards and have a lot of mobility, and in some ways benefit from the long lane because they can chase people down, while champions like Xerath want to stay in the short lane because they're immobile. So if you want to play something immobile like Caitlyn, pair it with a mid laner with mobility like Ahri, or a melee mid laner like Akali who benefits from a long lane. And if you want to play something immobile mid like Anivia, pair it with something that can be safe and push out side waves with some mobility like Lucian or Kalista or Vayne. Now, if you played League for a while, you might remember the name Froggen. He figured this out all the way back over 10 years ago with his famous Anivia pick. Not only is Anivia paired with Twitch, a low-range ADC who honestly fares better in a side lane than he does in mid, but at 20 minutes into the game, look at their lane assignments. All the way back in 2014, pro players had already figured out that the best thing to do was to pair immobile mid laners with mobile ADCs, or immobile ADCs with mobile mid laners, and then just give them the lane assignments that match their champion's archetype, sometimes for the entire game even. So don't just mindlessly swap your ADC to mid next time you get into the mid game. Consider who's stronger and is the best at securing the mid prio for your team, and with your champion archetypes in mind, which of you is actually safer to be in that side lane and who should be mid where it's safe? And if you're in champion select right now, then maybe give it a little bit of extra thought before you decide to pick your next ADC mid pair. Now, a bit of an announcement, I've started streaming on YouTube and Twitch again, where I'll be playing solo queue and giving educational commentary for both support and jungle, my two main roles. For this, I have to give a huge thank you to Logitech Australia, who were nice enough to send me a care package of their goodies that I could upgrade my stream setup with. This was a huge reason I decided to start streaming again. You may have noticed that my camera looked a little bit better in this video compared to before. Here is what my old web camera looked like. It was a 720p 30fps monstrosity that I swiped from an unnamed pro team I used to play for years ago, and because of its low quality, I never felt comfortable full screening my camera in my videos. But now I've got this beautiful Logitech MX Brio camera, which goes all the way up to 4K video quality. So expect to see a little bit more of my beautiful face in the future. So again, thank you to Logitech for helping me get set up to make the best content possible for you guys. Now, they didn't require me to do this, but I'm going to leave a link to their website in the video description below anyway, so you can check out their products and enjoy them hopefully as much as I do. Thanks for watching.